Good morning. It's Bernard Nomberg. I'm back for another Tuesday edition on the law. I'm with the Nomberg Law Firm in downtown Birmingham, and David and I handle, as you all know if you've been watching our series of talks on the law, we handle workers' compensation cases and Social Security disability and personal injury. And today we're talking about another topic under the workers' comp cases and claims. Today we're going to be addressing case nurses and what do they do and what's their role, how to handle them, what to expect, and those kind of things. And they do serve a very important role. And let me kind of explain who the characters are in a typical workers' comp claim so you'll get an idea of where these nurses fit in. You have the injured worker, of course. You have the insurance adjuster. That's the person who works on behalf of the workers' comp insurance company as kind of a decision maker, a go-to person for things, the position, if you will, of the other side of this. They help to make decisions on claims, what gets approved, what gets paid, etc. You also have the employer, of course. The injured worker worked for them. You also have the insurance company itself, and there's numerous insurance companies, but typically you're going to deal with the adjuster, or we as the plaintiff's attorney, the injured worker's attorney, that's who we deal with. But the insurance companies hire, or the adjuster hires, case nurses or case managers that help to coordinate and oversee the medical care of the injured worker. And before I talk badly about the case workers, and I'm not going to do much of that, most of the case workers, case nurses, case managers, again, don't confuse them with the insurance adjusters. These are the people who are dealing with the medical side of the case. They're hired by the insurance company or the adjuster to help coordinate the medical care for the injured worker. 99.9% of them that we've ever dealt with as the attorney for the injured worker, they're wonderful in what they do, and they help our clients, and they have good relationships with our clients, and they really help the workers' comp claim move along much more smoothly. However, there are the outliers, the few who overstep their bounds. They sometimes act as if they're practicing medicine when in fact that's not their role or their responsibility or their obligation in this matter, and we'll talk about how to deal with that in just a minute. But the case nurse's main obligation is to help the client, who is also our client. So there's a mutual client there, which is the injured worker. They're supposed to help coordinate care, get them to their appointments, or make sure that they're informed, and push the case forward to hopefully, once the client reaches maximum medical improvement, that's the doctor's term or the doctor's way of saying you have leveled off in your medical care, there's no more improvement to be made, and now we can make some other decisions in your claim. The case nurse is supposed to advocate for the injured worker to help them through that process. There are in many occasions where we'll have our clients will let us know we've been contacted by a case nurse, how do we deal with it? Well, I'll share with you how our firm deals with case nurses. Once we've been hired by an injured worker, we will typically make contact with the case nurse either by phone call or letter or both, letting them know that we represent the client, the injured worker, just like they do, but we have very different roles here. It is our preference that we communicate with our client about the doctor's visits and those types of things. We don't really have a problem with the case nurse most of the time talking to the client about the upcoming appointments. However, where there becomes a rub, if you will, is when the case nurses help with the doctor's offices, and that's the authorized treating doctor under the work comp, not our own client's private or personal doctor. This is strictly dealing with the authorized treating physician, called the ATP, in making these appointments. Sometimes these case nurses will make it the appointments effective or convenient for their own schedule and not for our client's schedule or ability to get to the appointments, because some of these appointments can be a couple hours away. For example, you may have somebody who lives in Dothan or Troy or Union Springs in the south part of the state, but their doctor may be in Birmingham, and that could be a 2 to 3 hour drive. We ask for the case nurses, and this is what we communicate to them, is that the appointments be set that's convenient for our client and to give us plenty of notice so our client knows what he or she is supposed to bring or wear for the particular appointment and the location and so forth. So we try to communicate that not only to the case nurse, but we let our clients know, hopefully with enough time ahead so they can plan, because sometimes these trips may require an overnight stay, and it doesn't always work out as smoothly as we would like from a communication standpoint, but that's part of what we do in the communications with the case nurse. Let me read a few things to you because case nurses have certain obligations, ethical, moral, as well as part of the associations they may belong to that have guidelines and restrictions. And there's also in the Alabama Administrative Code, there are things that they are supposed to adhere to. And most do. Make no mistake about it. They're very professional. They do their job wonderfully, and it helps our clients. There are just some of those out there, much like lawyers, much like doctors. There's a few in the group that sometimes kind of go stray afar and have their own agendas, and that's what creates problems for us, and we have to be on top of that from a communication standpoint. When we communicate with the case nurses, case managers, same description for the same person we're talking about here, we really try to emphasize, among other things, that when our clients go to their doctor's visits that are approved by workers' comp, when they're in the room, we want the client and his relative, family member, spouse, whoever it may be, to be in the room with the doctor without the case nurse being in the room. And the reason being is it allows the doctor and the patient to express themselves more freely, to talk more generally, more freely about what's going on, as opposed to a case nurse who's there monitoring the situation, being paid handsomely by the insurance company to do their job. Some call it spying. I've heard case nurses referred to as wolves in sheep's clothing, in that everything that they observe, everything they do by way of talking to our clients, talking to the doctors, they report back to the insurance company, to the adjuster, to let them know what's going on. A lot of times they will interview our clients unbeknownst to us, just trying to dig for information. And again, this is some of the nurses that may not be doing the type of job that we feel that they should be doing, going beyond that. It's almost acting as if they're an investigative agency of the insurance company as well. And please make no mistake about what I'm trying to say. That's a very small percentage of them, but it does create problems for our clients when those problems really shouldn't exist. There is the International Association of Rehab Professionals, IARP. It has a code of ethics that most of the case nurses belong to and are supposed to adhere to. And I won't give I won't bore you with all of the details of it, but that's one of the companies or the associations professionally that they belong to and that they're supposed to adhere to. There is also the National Association of Rehabilitation Providers in the private sector. Again, it's a national association that most belong to, and that requires them to have certain standards, certain responsibilities, certain codes of ethics, etc. And I want to read one thing to you under this NARPPS standards imposed by law. The standards are imposed by Alabama law, and this is coming from a case that has dealt with this issue. And your client, meaning the client that we have mutual responsibilities toward, is not the insurance company or the adjuster who hired the case nurse, but the advocacy is supposed to be for the injured worker. And that becomes a real conflict because you're getting paid The caseworker, the case nurse, is being paid by the insurance company, but their responsibilities are to the injured worker, and that becomes a real issue. It's kind of similar, if you think about it, by the authorized treating physician, when they are also paid by that insurance company, but the Hippocratic Oath requires them to give the utmost care that they can to the injured worker. We've got a question here from Morris, my buddy in Huntsville. Should the injured worker give information to the case nurse or just relate it to their attorney? Well, that's the issue. Of course, Morris, I know you'd address that. There is a certain amount of information the injured worker does need to disclose to the case nurse or the case manager, but we like to control or be involved in what is communicated, because most of those case nurses will start asking questions about 15 and 20 and 30 years ago that have nothing to do with this claim. They're just digging for information. We would prefer that if the case nurse has questions, if the case nurse has things that they need to ask about our client, that they come to us. And we make that very clear in the letter that we send out to the case nurses as soon as we learn who they are. And typically when we send out our letters of rep to the adjuster, we send out a letter at the exact same time when we give copies of those letters to the clients, just to let them know. The other couple of things I want to share with you guys is sometimes a case nurse is called upon to testify at a trial or during the discovery phase of a workers' comp case that's in litigation. And it becomes a real issue for the case nurses that kind of walk that fringe of what I'm referring to, because their responsibility is to our client, our mutual client, my client, their patient, or their client. But that case nurse has zero responsibility, obligation, or ethically or is permitted to influence the medical care for our client by communicating with that doctor. For example, a lot of clients don't know that they can ask that case nurse to be outside the room while they're in the room being examined and treated by the doctor. The problem becomes, in our opinion, when the case nurse is in the room at that same time and making suggestions or recommendations to the doctor. For example, if the doctor says, well, we need to give it a few more weeks of therapy and rehabilitation, and then consider shots for a back injury or shoulder injury or what have you, and then consider surgery, but then the nurse recommends something of a shorter timetable, and in our mind, as the attorney, I'm thinking, well, they're doing this to save money. That's the goal here. Is there a shorter, quicker, faster way to get that injured worker out of the doctor's office, out of the doctor's care, and back into the working for the employer? And I get it, we all get it, but that's not maybe what the authorized treating physician is thinking about. So that's why they can do their job. And please, if you're an injured worker going through a work comp case, and if you're one of our clients, or even if you're not, please consider what I'm telling you is that have that nurse, that case nurse, stay outside the room. They can do their job without being in the room. They're permitted to look at the file before and after. They can talk to the doctor or the doctor's nurse of the clinic before or after those visits, but they don't need to be in the room when you're in there. There should not be any hindrance in the client, the injured worker's communication abilities with the doctor or the doctor to the injured worker. And that's, I think, tantamount. It's very, very important that they stay out of the room, in our opinion. There's a few things that, going back to the testifying issue, that if a case nurse is called upon to testify in a trial or deposition, they've got a real problem if they've crossed that line or that boundary that I'm referring to about influencing medical care. And again, it's a very small percentage of these folks. Now, at some point during the case or the claim, either before or after the client reaches MMI, the case nurse will no longer be involved in the case. And that's not up to us or our side of this. This is coming from the adjuster for the insurance company. They make that decision. Guys, there are many more issues that deal with case nurses, case managers, and workers' comp claims, but it's too much for this 10 or 15 minutes today. If you have any questions or concerns about this particular area of a workers' comp claim, I ask you to please give us a call Be glad to talk about those things. You'll know how to get in touch with us. Our phone number is 205-930-6900. On the web, we're at nomberglaw.com. We have Facebook, Twitter, etc. As we do each Tuesday, we're going to pick a different area of the law. Next week, I think we're going to talk about something else that is not going to be in workers' comp or Social Security. We may hit something in personal injury type cases. I know in the future we want to talk to physical therapists about what they do. There's just so many other topics that we'll hit coming up. All of these videos are saved at our Facebook page, also on our website. We appreciate you stopping by for a few minutes or watching these in the future. Again, I'm Bernard Nomberg with the Nomberg Law Firm in downtown Birmingham, and we'd be glad to talk to you anytime after this finishes. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day and rest of your week, and we'll see you next week.